Hello, true duelists. It's YGO Strats Yu-Gi-Oh! Single card history, where I'm going to be talking about some of the cards that have impacted Yu-Gi-Oh! Throughout the years, and some of the other ones that didn't. Today's card, the most iconic trap in all of the game, Mirror Force. Mirror Force was first released in Metal Raiders, the second ever set in the game in 2002 as an ultra rare. And as an old and iconic card, it's had like 33 reprints over the years, so I'm just gonna list off a few of the notable ones, because that's what I do. It got a peasant rare printing in the Structure Deck Merrick in 2010 to make it more affordable, a rare print in 2012's Battle Pack Epic Dawn, a secret rare printing in Joey's World Mega Pack in 2013, a super rare in Dark Saviors in 2018, and to celebrate the game's 25th anniversary, it got another ultra rare printing in the reprinting of Metal Raiders again in 2023. For time on the ban list, this card ping-ponged in early games. It was one of the first cards to be limited on the July 2002 ban list, where it would stay until the August 2004 ban list, where it was placed among the 13 cards to ever be banned for the first time in the history of the game, alongside such powerhouses as Chaos Emperor, Envoy of the End, and Sandgan. What a time. This would only be for 2 formats, however, as it would come back to limited in April of 2005, before being banned again on the October 2005 ban list, and then being limited again on the very next ban list in April of 2006. It would stay at 1 for a good while after this, right up until the September 2012 ban list would finally let TCG players play more than 1 copy of the card. And it wouldn't be until the July 2014 ban list that the card would come back to 3, just in time for the Duelist Alliance format, and ever since this video, it's been there ever since. A normal trap card, its effect reads: when an opponent's monster declares an attack, destroy all your opponent's attack position monsters. Like I said at the beginning of this video, Mirror Force is probably the most iconic trap in all of the game. It's basically synonymous with the phrase, "you activated my trap card," and fittingly enough, it was as powerful in the game as it was in the anime, just as long as we ignore that one time where it did damage for no reason beyond the writers deciding that it did. That was a different card actually in real life, fun fact, but we'll get to that later. This card is a card that's so generic and so useful that I won't be focusing on any one deck that played it for the most part, because for the first 10 years of the game's history, if your deck was playing trap cards, then Mirror Force was a solid one to throw in your list. And in the early 10 or so years of Yu-Gi-Oh!, trap cards were in damn near every list, so it was just in abundance. Older Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks didn't quite have the same consistency that most decks have now, with one of the biggest changes of modern decks being just how reliably they can pull off their combos, especially compared to the older cards. Not to mention the speed with which more decks have been able to put out 8,000 damage. That's not to say that there weren't OTK decks back in the day, it's just that not every deck could play a generic and easy access OTK button like most decks do now with something like, say, Access Code Talker. Archetypes weren't really a thing for a good amount of time in the early game, and while the game had things like Monarchs, a lot more of decks that you saw were just piles of the best stuff available, with not so much synergy as much as it was, well, Mirror Force could wipe the board, so I think I'll play that, and Pot of Greed draws 2, so I'll play that. Being limited did hinder its appearance in decks compared to some other common traps from the early game, such as Bottomless Trap Hole or Torrential Tribute, but that's not to say that it didn't see play. The card's biggest spike historically would actually come ultimately in 2013 and 2014, which makes a bit of sense when you remember that this is the point in the game where it stops being a Saki 1-of and goes back towards being 3 in a deck. And while the game evolved over the 10 years, Mirror Force's strength had been just as good as it was in 2002. It is the ultimate punish to having all your monsters in attack position and trying to swing for game, because a flipped up Mirror Force clearing your board is not something that's easy to recover from, especially if you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! In the year 2013 and earlier. Because of this, even when the card was limited, and especially after it coming back to 3, it was incredibly common to change a monster to defense position before attacking, even if that meant you wouldn't be securing game that turn, because flipping up Mirror Force could be the difference in having game or being so down in resources that the opponent can turn the tide. A well-timed Mirror Force is simply that devastating. Even after generic traps fell out of favor as the game evolved, the card still saw a handful of spikes in play. Even a deck like Nekroz would occasionally side in 2 or 3 copies of Mirror Force, because even in that format, it could be game determinative. And when players don't respect Mirror Force, it feels terrible for them and great for you. No, I'm not prepared for Mirror Force when I attack Nekroz. What the fuck is going on? If you want to see this for yourself, go ahead and pull up a clip of your favorite Yu-Gi-Oh streamer, because I guarantee you there's a clip of them running into Mirror Force. And while streamers are basically sometimes known to exaggerate the emotions, running into Mirror Force, no one's exaggerating. Even as late as 2017, the card was still seeing play, with the Sacred 60, as it is known, Paleozoic Frog decks would main it, because Zoodiac wasn't prepared for that type of removal. Removal in the form of a trap card during the battle phase when their best monster, broadly speaking in terms of interruption, is a monster pop. So much so that Zoolists themselves would also cite it in on occasion, because the card was just that good against the standard Zoodiac end board. After this, the card pretty much falls off entirely, and it's for a number of reasons. Firstly, there's the change of mentality in regards to trap cards among the player base. It's generally acknowledged that it's better to, say, torrential tribute away all the materials the opponent would use to summon their boss than it is to let them summon their boss and then try and disrupt it in the battle phase. And even then, why use torrential tribute when there's also powerful solemn cards like Judgment and Warning? I'm not going to sit here and argue which is always better in every circumstance, because that can't be done, but regardless of how it's done, most players agree not letting them get the boss monster at all is far better than waiting until everything's built up to try and disrupt it. But more than that, due to the card's iconic nature, it's had multiple variants throughout the years. There were in-theme ones that were seemingly printed just because Mirror Force was limited for so long, such as the iconic Froggy Force Wield, and then there's just the series of retrains of sorts that this card got in the 2010s, not the least of which includes Storming Mirror Force. Storming Mirror Force is exactly the same as regular Mirror Force, but it bounces the monsters the opponent controls in attack position to the hand instead. This version became significantly better just because of the fact that by the time this card released, there were an abundance of cards that had graveyard effects and effects when they were destroyed, serving as a Mirror Force that could actually be playable against a deck like Burning Abyss or Cosmo. The iconic nature of the card also saw that Konami would release Mirror Force Launcher, a continuous trap that would allow you to discard a monster to add a copy of Mirror Force from your deck to your hand, making it much easier to access this card. But similar to the trap card that would get the players access to Magic Cylinder, it's not that good for a very simple reason. A trap card is a trap. Traps work best when the opponent does not know about them. When you search Mirror Force and set one card, you've set Mirror Force 99% of the time, and the opponent's expressly aware of that, which means you now are waiting for them to walk into a trap you set in front of them blatantly, and unless your opponent has the memory of, say, your favorite Yu-Gi-Oh streamer, that's probably not gonna happen. Overall, Mirror Force is a staple of Yu-Gi-Oh, much in the same way that Blue Eyes White Dragon is. It's been a fan favorite in regards to the physical game as much as it was a favorite to see go off in the anime. Its ability to turn the tide of a game by itself was so strong that it impacted the way players played, with a boss monster going to defense position before the battle phase being second nature out of the respect for the sheer potential that you might see this card. That's a feat that very few cards in this game have accomplished and makes this iconic card even more memorable. While it may have been power crept by the game after 20 years, its legacy lives on through things like Storming Mirror Force or Drowning Mirror Force, and through, of course, that iconic line, "You've activated my trap card." And so that's our look at Yu-Gi-Oh! Single card history, Mirror Force. Stay tuned for our next video, and feel free to suggest some cards to review or what type of video you'd like to see. Don't forget to like, and as always, subscribe to YGO Strats to impress your smokin' Italian wife, and so you too can be a true duelist.